Good morning. It's Monica from Life is Art, and we are here to do our 10 a.m. technique at the Canada's Big Landmarks online crop. Our topic today is Emboss, Resist, and Cluster. And we're going to be using a stamp set that is featured in the September to December mini catalog. And it's one that's associated with the Regal Winter collection, and that is called Regal Flora. This is a beautiful collection, very saturated, jewel tone colors, and it doesn't have to be Christmas. It can be just about anything. There's also some lovely specialty paper with foiling that's available with this collection. You can get dies to go with the stamp set. I just got the stamp set by itself rather than with the dies, but there are some fun frames and shapes that are there as well. And of course, some embellishments and some ribbons. So we are going to be using that Regal Flora stamp set. Here's a little bit bigger picture of what we're working with, and it has some beautiful florals, of course, and then some leaves here and here, and then also some little dots, sort of a messy, unmessy, messy kind of stamping. Then some lovely sentiments, wishing I were there to give you a hug, sending love your way, thanks, and missing you. And we used those sentiments yesterday during our technique. But today we're going to be using some of the floral images and the leaves, and we're going to use them a couple different ways. So let's get started. If you're joining me live, just say hello or howdy so I know you're here. I see my mom's watching. Good morning, Mom. You are ready and waiting for the link to go up. And if you're watching later on replay, you can just say replay. Okay, we're going to be creating a card today, but this is the same kind of thing you could do on a layout in a mini album for whatever project you're working on, tags, you name it. But we're going to keep our color scheme very simple. We're going to stick with two colors, basically, two colors. And our two ink colors that we're going to use are Crushed Curry and Garden Green. I'll turn them that way. Crushed Curry and Garden Green. And those colors look really lovely together. They're nice and vibrant and but very deep colors too. They're not sort of pastel-y. They're good, strong colors. And so those are the colors we're going to be using. We're also going to be doing some embossed and resist. So we need to have some embossing powder. I'm going to use white embossing powder. My Versamark is getting dinged up. We're going to be using some Versamark ink to do our heat embossing. And we're also going to stamp our sentiment in black using the Tuxedo black Memento ink. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a rundown of things that we are going to be using. Let me also grab, I forgot to grab this. I was rushing in to the house at 2 minutes to 10 because I had to drop my son off at school this morning. My daughter off at school and then come home and then get my son from school or to school. So, yeah, I forgot to grab some scrap paper. And I don't need this large of a piece of scrap paper, so I'm going to quickly just make it a little smaller. Just like that. And that way, I can use it for several different things. Okay, so I've got my scrap paper. I don't need it immediately, but I will need it in a little while. Okay, we're going to start with a panel for the front of our card. Good morning, Allison. And this is just a basic white cardstock that has been cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And what I want to do, I'm actually going to turn it sideways just for this part of the process. I want to line it up on my mat like so. And I'm going to bring in some masking tape. So there's lots of different things that you can use to mask with. I know people have lots of different things that they use. I'm just using this green tape. It's a very low tack, and I believe it's just called masking tape. And I'm going to mask off a 1/2 inch along this bottom, which is actually, this is the left side. So just going to stick that right down to my mat. And then I'm going to give myself, this is why I'm using the mat, so I can get the measurements. I'm going to give myself about 1 1/4 inches. Yeah, about 1 1/4 inches, maybe a little bit more. I'm going to give myself an extra 1/8. Just like that. And stick that down. Now, yes, I've stuck it down, but I'm going to lift it up again. And now that we've done our good measurements, although this does have measurements on here, I could have used that, but it's neither here nor there. Because I'm going to be using my Versamark ink for this, and I'm going to be stamping off the edge a little bit, so I want to protect my mat below. So I've got my Versamark ink here, and from the stamp set, I'm going to grab this leaf cluster. I really like this. I like the look of it. I like the size of it. I like the shape of it. And we're going to use it a couple different ways for this project. But what we're going to do first is we're going to ink up in the Versamark, and we're going to do some random stamping in this space between, oh, look at that. It was dirty. Woo. Let's grab our stamp cleaner, our Stampin' Scrub. I'm going to spritz a little bit of water on it. This is what happens when you rush in at the last minute. You sometimes have a little bit of anomalies happening. But that's okay. All right. Let's flip our piece of paper over. We're going to do that again. That is the good thing about paper. Paper has 2 sides. We're just going to flip it over, and we're just going to line up our card again. This will just give you a double chance to see what's happening. Let me stick one down. So we're going to line it up at 1/2 inch. Make sure we're at 1/2 inch. And then we're going to give ourselves 1 3/8. There we go. Grab our scrap paper. And hopefully I clean that off well enough that we're not going to get anything too weird. Okay, I wondered because when I looked at my Versamark, I noticed a little green tinge, and I was like, oh, that's weird. All right, let's do some random stamping. And we're not going to overlap our stamps, hopefully. Actually, that little bit of green is kind of giving me a guide as to where I've stamped. There we go. And you'll notice I'm twisting and turning my stamp around this way and that way so that it's nice and random. There we go. Like so. Now we're going to grab our embossing powder. We're going to sprinkle that on. And yes, I put a lot on. It's all good because it's all going to go back in the jar anyway. If I can lift this up. And this is also a good reason to have this scrap paper here because it's going to collect the extra ink. Sorry, the extra embossing powder. And then all we have to do is funnel it back in. Woo. Like so. Excellent. Okay, now let's grab our heat tool. And we're just going to go ahead and heat emboss this. And I'm just leaving the tape right on there. Hopefully our heat embossing will kind of cover up any green that might be showing. But it's okay, because we're going to do some inking. This is where we're going to do the Emboss Resist. So you want to lift your paper up off your table, off your work surface, because in case the heat damages the finish on your table or something, you don't want that. And the air can kind of swirl around and get on the backside. Some people even do their heat embossing from the backside of their paper. Takes a little longer, but it works. If you're ever worried that the embossing powder is going to blow everywhere, that's one way to do it. When you're heat embossing on vellum, it often helps to emboss on the backside. So there we go. I'm just going to make sure that the stuff that's on the tape gets embossed too, so that I'm not throwing powder around everywhere. There we go. Okay, let's let it cool for half a second. So I don't know if you can see it in the lights, but there is a little bit of shine happening where we've done our heat embossing. And those lovely leaves. We're going to stick it back down because we're going to do some inking now. And this is why we left the tape on there, because we're going to mask where we're inking as well. And so I'm going to bring in my two colors, my crushed curry and my garden green. I'm going to start with the crushed curry. Let me grab one of my little holders here. My mom gave me this. It's drawer liner, like from the dollar store, and it holds your ink pad from sliding around while you're inking, so you only have to do one hand. You don't have to hold it. All right, so we've got some crushed curry on there, and we're going to come in and add some ink to our little section here that we've heat embossed, like that. And then we're going to switch over and do some garden green. We want to work fairly quickly on this process. And I'll show you why in a second. So we're adding some garden green, and I'm kind of going here and there. You notice how I kind of trailed that crushed curry up the side. We're just going to get all inky in there. Now, before I go too much farther, I'm going to grab just a clean tissue here, and I'm going to do a little bit of buffing. And what that does, it removes any of the ink, see that? That's sitting on top of the embossed portions of our image. And then we can come in and add a little more of the crushed curry. When you're doing ink blending, sometimes you need to go a little bit back and forth between the colors. And I'm trying to get a nice rich color going on here. There we go. And I'm going to close that up for now and grab a little bit more of the green. Like that. That's looking pretty good. I like how that looks. Okay, again, let's pick a clean spot. And you'll notice I'm kind of going across where the yellow is first, and then I'm going where the green is, and that's because I don't necessarily want to pull any green that might be sitting and then like streak it through my yellow. So you just got to be careful about that. And then when you're done doing that little bit of buffing, what happens is your white then pops back into bright white, and that is how you reveal the resist, because wherever the embossing is, the ink is not going to settle. Oh, look at that. I got some nice green happening over there. Probably got that off my fingers or off the tape. All right, that's okay. There we go. So we've got our Emboss Resist happening. Now we're going to do some clustering. And for that, we're going to bring in our stamp set and we're going to do some stamping, but I'm staying within the same colors, the crushed curry and the garden green. I'm going to set this aside. I've got an extra piece of paper here for stamping on. And we're going to start with the crushed curry. From my stamp set, I'm going to bring in the trio cluster of flowers. And I'm just going to stamp them there like that. And yeah, I'm just going to stamp one of those. Let's wash our stamp while we're at it, so that we don't have a surprise later if we decide to do some heat embossing. And then I'm going to bring back in my garden green, and we're going to stamp out some leaves. We're going to stamp a few of the little cluster that we used. And this one, we're going to stamp it twice. So we're going to stamp it once, and then we're going to stamp it a second time. And that is first and second generation stamping. We can do that a couple times. So we're going to stamp first generation, second generation. And what that does is it's giving us this exact same color, but we're getting a dark tone and a light tone. So even though you're trying to stick within the same color combination, you can get light and dark. And I could have done the same thing with the flowers. I could have stamped first and second generation, and then I would have darker flowers and lighter flowers. But I'm just sticking with the one for now. Let's also wash this one. Sometimes what is helpful when you are washing stamps and stamping is to have scrap paper on the side that you can kind of stamp off on to remove a lot of the ink before you come to your stamp chamois or your Stampin' Scrub, and then you have less buildup of ink. Although last week I cleaned my Stampin' Scrub probably maybe the third time in all the years I've owned it, and I've had it for like 20 years. So, you know, you don't have to clean it too often. There, I'm coming in with the garden green again, and this different leaf cluster. It's kind of got a little sprig and little leaves, and we're just going to stamp that a couple times. And I'm just doing that in first generation, full strength stamping, and we'll wash off that stamp as well. In fact, that last one I washed, I think it needs a little extra. Okay. There we go. Now, I did not buy the die set, as I said before, for this particular stamp set, but you can totally just grab your paper snips and do some fussy cutting. Now, I do a lot of fussy cutting, so first you're going to rough cut. You can even rough cut a little bit more, take off the excess bits, like that. Okay, and then we're going to fussy cut. And to do the fussy cutting, you want to start somewhere near the edge, and you're going to come in and leave a halo of the basic white showing around the edge of your item. You're going to pivot your paper, and you're just going to cleanly cut all the way around. If you were cutting with a die, and I like to remind you of this, you would have a white edge around your image. So when you're fussy cutting, don't feel that it is necessary for you to follow the edge of your stamp. For one thing, it's really hard. There are times when I do that, like when I'm paper piecing. If I'm stamping an image several times on different patterns and different cardstocks and I want to paper piece, yes. There are portions where I will cut right along the line, the edge of the stamped image. But for the most part, leave that halo. It allows for the odd little boo-boo, you know, when you get a little closer or you get a little farther. If you're too far, you can fix it. And if you're too close, you can just leave it. and it all kind of evens out in the end. So you just go around your entire image, and there we go, just like that. And then we can do the same thing for our leaves. Now, I'm not going to fussy cut all of these because you don't necessarily, I mean, some people like to watch this because they're crazy like me, but other people do not like to sit and watch somebody fussy cut. It can give them the heebie-jeebies sometimes. But we're just fussy cut around these leaves and little sprig. And there we go. Now, around these little sprigs, you can decide how much detail you want to get. I tend to do just sort of in and out a little bit. Now, I have fussy cut a lot of these because the kit of the month for, let me see, September? Yes, September. Had some of these, and so I fussy cut a lot of these stamped images. So I've kind of got the rhythm down. And you will find that if you're fussy cutting a lot of the same image over and over again. I know Shannon has a favorite floral stamp set, and she can just stamp and cut hundreds of them, and you get into a rhythm. You can put a movie on and just go to town. All right, so let's put aside our paper snips for now and bring back in our base. We're also going to bring in our card base, and I'm using the crushed curry for my card base, and this has been cut to 8.5 by 5.5. I've scored it in the center at the 4 1/4, and I'm going to fold it with the bump side to the inside. Even though I use a scoreboard now, I used to use a ruler and a bone folder, I still like to line everything up, make sure everything lines up before I crease it down, because there can be still a tiny little bit of wander. I feel embossing powder on my mat, little bits that escaped. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this to my card base. And we're going to center it. There will be just a smidgen of that crushed curry showing all the way around, like that. Isn't that pretty? I like how those two colors go together, the garden green and crushed curry. And then let's start doing some clustering. And I actually had it was kind of interesting. I had somebody ask me about clustering and making clusters yesterday. And I thought, well, that's convenient because that's what we're working on today. So I've got a bunch of little pieces that I've already gone ahead and fussy cut. You can see I've got the first generation and second generation of those leaves, and you can see how I've cut them out there. I'm not going to make you have to sit and watch me do all of that. And we're just going to go ahead and make a little bit of a cluster. We're also going to bring in our stamp sentiment in a minute. So let's start by putting down these flowers first. And I want to add some dimensionals. And I'm actually going to use the mini dimensionals. And I'm going to keep my dimensionals kind of in the center of my flowers, like that. And that's going to give me lots of room to tuck things. I still may need to trim, but hopefully that will give me a good basis for my clustering. Now, I'm just going to kind of gauge my distance here. Yeah, there we go. Oh, that one's stuck. Okay, since that one's already stuck, let's just add some adhesive to the back of it. It's already stuck into the foam. So some people like to create a cluster just holding the pieces in their hand and just fitting them all together. I sometimes do that, and sometimes I just kind of lay everything out without adhering them. And sometimes I kind of do half and half. So today I'm doing sort of a half and half. And actually, I don't want it quite that low, but it may be that low since we've already stuck the dimensionals down. We'll see. We'll see. You can always do a little switch-o, change-o. Who else does that? They stick something down and peel it up. I did it just the other day. Didn't I? We were working on a project. Stick it down, pick it up, stick it down, pick it up. Yeah. All right, we're just going to shift a little bit up. There we go. All right. And then we're going to tuck some things. So let me just kind of do it dry, tucking things in and see what we think. I'm going to stick some of these leaves in here, like so. I think that one should go on top. So what I've got is I've got two things down here at the bottom with sort of larger leaves, and that gives a nice base, a solid base and kind of grounding. This strip also grounds whatever happens on the card. Then we've got some lighter leaves coming above. There's 5 different clusters of leaves here. We've got 3 flowers, so we've got odd numbers happening, although altogether that makes 8. But that's okay. So let's go ahead and stick those on. I'll stick this one down with some tape, but I think those littler ones might be easier if I use some liquid glue. So we're just going to tuck that under there. I like that it's overlapping onto my inked portion. If I had gone up a little farther even, I could have maybe hidden that boo-boo I got going on there, but that's okay. We're just gonna ignore it for now. What is the saying? I'm going to just go in my craft room and ignore my problems like an adult. Isn't that how it goes? Something like that. And then let's add our lighter one kind of on top in between the two, like that. I've kind of staggered the heights, so lower, mid, tallest. Looking good. And now we need to add in our sentiment. So for the sentiment, I've got a piece of white, basic white, that I've gone ahead and cut to 3/8 of an inch. And I'm just grabbing my scrap paper for this. And I used basic white, but I don't really want to stamp on the basic white because we have a lot of white happening. And I want to stay within my color family that I'm using, the greens and yellows. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my crushed curry and my blending brush. And in fact, there's probably enough yellow on here. I don't need to re-ink. And I'm going to ink this little strip. And just lightly. So it's going to be lighter than my flowers. I just want a smidgen of that color on there. Okay? That's all we need to do. So if you ever want, now that we've brought in the 2-tone cardstock, you'll notice that there's a dark side and a light side. So this is kind of like the light side of the crushed curry. So let's grab a sample here. So we've got crushed curry, and there we've got a much lighter version, but it's still a version of it because we made it with that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to stamp on this. I've got my little word, thanks. I use a lot of thank you cards, and so it's always good to have some on hand. I'm going to bring in my black ink for this. Ink up my little word, thanks. And I'm going to bring this a little closer to myself. I want to stamp kind of to the right end, and hopefully I'll get it centered. And if I don't, I can always flip it over and come to this side. But that looks good. And then what we're going to do is we're going to determine how much of this we need. So I want it to kind of stick out from there. And so I think if I trim it right about here, grab my paper snips, That will give me a good length. So it's always good. Just do a little extra and then you can make it fit. But I want to add a little something. So if I tuck this in here right now, you can see it. It looks fine. But I want to add a little extra to kind of draw more attention to my sentiment because it kind of disappears. And so I'm just going to take my black ink, hold my paper 90 degrees to the ink pad, and just rub right on the edge, on the very edge of the cardstock. And now you can see that we've got a very fine black edge on there. Hopefully you can see that if it'll focus. And that will just make it stand out a smidgen more. I could cut black cardstock and make an edge, but it'll be so much bigger, and I think I like it just with that little amount. Now, then the decision is, do we pop it up? I think so. I think I'm going to use some dimensionals, and I'm going to pop it up so it has a little step up from the background. Why not? The only thing we popped up was the flowers. So let's tuck this in here like that. Stick it down. And then let's add some color to this. We've got our 2024 to 2026 in color resin dots. And although there is no crushed curry in this, we do have the peach pie, which is actually, when you look at the stamped image and the resin dot, it's very close. It's close enough. And the greens do not work with the green. So we're going to go with the little peach pie ones. And let's add, let me see, we'll add a couple here, like that. We're going to kind of span the edge right there, kind of breaks up that straight line. And then let's add another one. See how far away we want to go. Maybe right there. We'll just tuck it right in there like that. Now the centers of my flowers, I kind of thought about adding something into the center of my flowers, but I don't know if this is what I want. I don't think so. And I don't think the greens wouldn't match, and I don't want to add other colors. I could add some of the basic rhinestones, but you know what? I think I'm just going to leave it the way it is. And this little green up here, if I wanted to hide that, I could have stamped one of these leaves right onto the card base to hide that. I'm going to ignore it for now. It was probably the edge of my hand or something that did that. And, you know, that happens sometimes. If this was a really white, you could try and take a gel pen to cover that up. I could add some bling on there. I could add another cluster of leaves. You know, I could cut out another little something, but I think it would become too much. So I'm just going to leave it. And that's just how it is. So we started out by masking off our basic white. We stamped with our Versamark and heat embossed with white embossing powder. And then we inked with our crushed curry and our garden green using our blending brushes and buffed it off to create that white popping through and showing off that resist factor that the heat embossing has. Then, of course, we used our inks again to do our stamping. We did some fussy cutting, and then we did a little inking on our paper to create this lighter yellow for our sentiment. Inked the very edge of those, put them all on a crushed curry base, and I think that that is a really cute card. And we didn't need any designer series paper for this. All we needed was some inks, some embossing powder, and some paper, some cardstock. So I think that is a fun way to make use of all of those products, and a good way to practice working on your clustering and other techniques. I hope you enjoyed seeing that come together. If you create a card like this, be sure to take a photo of it, pop it in the comments when I post the pictures of my cards, so then we can see and be inspired by your artwork as well. And have a good rest of the morning. We will be on at 11:30 for Chat and Craft. All right, we'll see you then. Toodaloo. Bye.